So really quickly, what we're going to do is we're going to go to your game object menu and create a plane. It's a simple two-dimensional plane, well, in the three-dimensional space. You can move your view around with the middle mouse button. You can drag it around with the right mouse button. And the left mouse button selects. You can also drag to select. Your mouse wheel scrolls in and out. And you definitely want a mouse that's got all of those commands on it to make this much more usable. You can center on an object by double-clicking on it in your hierarchy tab. The hierarchy tab is very handy to get around. You've also got this little widget up here to reorientate yourself, top view, front view, left, back, right. And clicking on the square in the very middle will toggle between a perspective mode and isometric mode. Yes, maybe? Come on. Well, I didn't think I was lying, but that's really odd. I'm sure that's how it's supposed to work. I can toggle it off by right-clicking on it, but I was pretty sure clicking on the block in the middle should toggle between isometric and perspective, but that doesn't seem to be going on. For reference, I am currently using Unity 3.5.2 F2, but this is generally going to be applicable to virtually any version of Unity because we're not going to delve into some of the more complex stuff. So at this point we have a plane. Now actually we'll go back to perspective mode. And now I'm also going to invoke a cube. So the plane is in the middle. Good. We're going to bring in another, just a primitive object, just a cube. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this via the arrows. I'm just left-clicking on one of the arrows to move it around. I could also click on the cube in the middle and sort of freely move it around, but I find that very awkward to do in a 3D view. And of course, through the inspector view, you can hard-code in a position. So we'll set it to 0 and 0, and we're going to set it 5 units above the plane. So the units in Unity generally conform to meters in terms of how the physics system works. But you can sort of fudge it and do whatever. But the physics will generally, by default, look the best and feel correct if you assume that 1 unit is 1 meter. And yet, the game, one of the big draws to Unity, it is a full physics engine that can do really quite nice stuff. At this point, I could hit play, and at this point, we are actually playing the game. It switches over to the game tab. It gives us the view from the camera, and there's not much happening. So I'm going to toggle off the play. It brings us back to the scene mode. One thing that's worth noting is when we are playing the game, and we are in the game tab here, we can switch back to the scene, and we can continue to inspect the objects in the scene from this view, despite the fact that the game is still running, and we'll see how powerful that is a little bit later on. In fact, at this point, I'm going to tear off the game tab, and I'm going to stick it onto the side, and that way we'll get a nice side-by-side view of the game screen, and then our scene here. Our scene we can still navigate around. You can see the camera over here. Well, the camera preview matches what we see in the game. It is a little boring to look at right now. I'm going to add one more object, which is going to be a light. I'm going to make it a directional light, which is good to simulate sort of sunlight. The position of the directional light in the scene doesn't matter. Well, that's interesting that it's sort of local coordinates here, as opposed to, there we are, now we're on global coordinates for moving the object around, based on its rotation. So basically, this directional light is already rotated. If we take away all the rotation, by default, it's just going to come into play facing directly, directly forward from where the camera is. And you can see the light is directly hitting the face of this cube. And then we can rotate it around back to where it was. It gets a nice angle. And you can see here the widget is oriented towards the sort of world coordinates. The green arrow is just pointing up in the world. But if we toggle this to local coordinates, then the widget is aligned to the object itself. And there's going to be different times when you're going to want to move it one way or another. Still, now we've got some amount of lighting in the game, and let's make things happen. So at this point, we still haven't programmed, but we're going to enable this sort of physics system. Now, by default, these objects over here already have colliders for the physical system, but that just means that things can hit them, but they still aren't affected by the forces of physics. To do that, we're going to set this box to have a component, physics, rigid body. Now at this point, it's a fully physics-enabled object. It has a mass, it has a density of 1. This is what this means. Drag, angular drag, a few different things to affect. It's also affected by gravity by default. And what that means is now when we hit play, you're going to see this box is going to drop until it lands onto the surface and then stop there. And if we were to take this box and switch to our rotation mode and give it just a little tweak like this to make it more interesting, and I do like to usually keep it on just the movement mode, and then if we play, it should land in a slightly more interesting fashion. This would look even better if we had shadows, but I'm just using the free version of Unity here, which means I don't get shadows. if you wanted to, you could enable them, I believe, from the light source itself, shadow type. So I could turn them on here. I could enable some soft shadows, but they won't actually do anything since I don't have the professional version of the software. The free version does virtually everything that the professional version does not. The lack of shadows is not a functionality problem, it's a visual problem, and so I like the fact that they left that out on the free version. I think that's fine. You can develop the whole game, then when it's time to sort of throw some money at it when it's coming close to release, then you turn on shadows and everything looks beautiful. There are a few other things that aren't included in the pro version, like the new pathfinding system, and I think that is a little bit of a shame. It's a little unfortunate that it's not included, because again, I would like it if it were possible to do the bulk of your development in the free version, get that sort of confidence that yes, things are going well, you're getting close to the end of the project, you know this is something you're actually going to finish. I would like to see it so that you could implement everything mechanically, and then you go pro for the sort of polish that you really need for a proper commercial product, and that would include things like lighting and shaders and whatnot. So at this point you can see that having a simple physics-enabled game is really, really quite easy to make. And that's what we're going to be focusing on. And of course we can't just have a game that is a cube falling on a surface. We could of course have many cubes all landing on one another, and that would be very, very exciting, but not really a game. So the game we're going to do is we're going to implement the classic game Breakout.